When I was sorting through my deceased wife's belongings, I found a USB drive with a note that said, "Richard, if you're reading this, I'm already gone. Check safety deposit box 247 at First National. Go alone." That USB drive and what I found in that box would expose the most devastating betrayal I never saw coming. My name is Richard Martinez, but everyone calls me Richard. I'm 62 years old, and I spent 33 years married to Martha before she lost her battle with cancer last spring. We built a good life together in our little house on Oak Street here in Asheville, North Carolina. I'm a retired civil engineer, spent 30 years building roads and bridges for the state until I retired at 52. Martha was a school secretary until she got sick. We weren't rich, but we were comfortable, had a plan for retirement, money set aside, everything organized the way engineers like things organized. Martha died on a Thursday in April. The cancer took her quick at the end, which the doctor said was a mercy. I'm not sure mercy is the right word when you lose the woman you've loved for 33 years, but I kept that opinion to myself. After the funeral, after the casserole stopped coming and the sympathy cards stopped arriving, I started the job every widower dreads, going through a lifetime of belongings. Look, I'm not sentimental about most things, but going through Martha's personal stuff was harder than I expected. Every drawer you open, every jacket you pull from a hanger feels like having a conversation with someone who can't answer back anymore. I was working my way through Martha's desk when I found that USB drive taped to the bottom of her jewelry box. The note was in her handwriting, shaky from the medication, but definitely hers. Safety deposit box 247 minus I didn't even know we had a second box. We'd always used box 156 for our important papers. This was news to me, and Martha and I didn't keep secrets from each other. At least I thought we didn't. I drove to First National the next morning. The bank manager, a woman named Carol Thompson who'd known Martha for years, walked me to the vault. Box 247 was smaller than our regular box, and when I opened it, I found a manila folder labeled for Richard's eyes only in Martha's careful script. Inside that folder was documentation that would change everything I thought I knew about my family. Bank statements, printed emails, copies of investment documents, all showing that my daughter-in-law Linda had been systematically draining our retirement accounts for the past 18 months. The total was $105,000 money Martha and I had saved for 30 years, gone. Rodriguez Jad married my son Steven 9 years ago. She's a financial advisor with a local firm, always talking about investment opportunities and tax strategies. Smart woman, I'll give her that. Maybe too smart for her own good. Steven works construction, good with his hands like his old man, but numbers were never his strong suit. He's 37 now, been doing drywall and framing work since he got out of high school. When Linda offered to help manage our finances after Martha got sick, we thought it was thoughtful, family helping family. Here's the thing, looking at those bank statements, I could see the pattern clear as day. Monthly transfers disguised as investment management fees, loans to shell companies that existed only on paper, something called estate planning adjustments that moved money from our joint accounts into accounts I'd never authorized. Linda had used her professional knowledge and our family trust to rob us blind. The worst part, Martha had figured it out. The medical bills from her cancer treatment had forced her to pay closer attention to our accounts. She'd spent her last few months documenting everything, building a case she was too sick to pursue herself. She'd left it for me to handle. I sat in that bank vault for a long time, reading every document twice. My hands were shaking, not from age, but from pure anger. Then I drove to the VFW hall where my buddy Gary Collins hangs out most afternoons. Gary and I served together in the Army back in the day, different units, but we both did our time overseas in the early 80s. He's 60 now, retired from the phone company, and he's the kind of guy you want in your corner when things get complicated. "Gary," I said, sliding into the booth across from him, "I need your advice on something, and I need you to keep it between us for now." I showed him everything. Gary's got a good head for strategy, always did, even back in our Army days. He read through Martha's documentation while I nursed a coffee and tried to keep my hands steady. The VFW hall was quiet that afternoon, just a few of the regular guys playing cards in the corner and the bartender watching a baseball game on the old TV above the bar. "Rick," he said, finally setting down the last bank statement, "this is serious fraud. We're talking felony territory here. You need a lawyer, and you need to be real careful about how you handle this." "What do you mean, careful?" "I mean, Linda's going to know something's up the minute you start asking questions. She's been watching your accounts for over a year. She'll notice if you change your patterns. You need to gather more evidence before you make any moves. Set some traps, see how she reacts." Gary was right, of course. Linda was smart and she was careful. She'd been planning this for months, maybe years. If I was going to beat her at her own game, I needed to be smarter. Over the next 2 weeks, I played the part of the grieving widower who wasn't paying much attention to finances. Meanwhile, I was documenting everything. I installed software on my home computer to monitor our remaining accounts, stuff I'd learned about from a cybersecurity seminar at the senior center. I started recording phone conversations too, perfectly legal in North Carolina as long as one party consents, and I was definitely consenting. Let me tell you, learning to be sneaky at 62 isn't easy when you've spent your whole life being straightforward. But Martha had left me a roadmap, and I wasn't going to let her down. The trap I set was simple. I called Linda on a Tuesday afternoon and told her I was thinking about cashing out one of our larger investment accounts to pay for some home repairs. Said I wanted to surprise the kids by fixing up the house before the holidays. Maybe put in a new kitchen for when Patricia brings the grandkids for Christmas. Her reaction told me everything I needed to know. The friendly, helpful daughter-in-law disappeared, replaced by someone calculating and desperate. You could hear it in her voice, panic barely controlled. "Rick, that would be a huge mistake," she said. "Those investments are performing really well right now. You'd lose so much money in penalties and taxes. Let me handle the home repairs. Stephen and I can help with the costs." When I pressed her for details about these performing investments, her story fell apart faster than a house built on sand. She couldn't tell me which company was managing them, what the current value was, or when I'd see any returns. Just vague promises about long-term growth and tax advantages. "Linda," I said, keeping my voice steady, "I'd like to see the quarterly statements for these investments. Can you email those to me?" Long pause. "I'll have to request those from the investment firm. It might take a few days. That's fine, I'll wait." I knew those statements would never come because the investments didn't exist. Martha's documentation had already shown me that Linda had been moving our money into shell accounts, not legitimate investments. That night I called Patricia, my daughter who lives in Portland. Patty's 35 now, teaches 3rd grade, and she's got a good head on her shoulders. Always been the steady one in the family. She's divorced, raises her daughter Nancy on her own. Nancy just turned 20, goes to Portland State, studies accounting. Smart girl, gets that from her mother's side. I'd kept this whole mess from Patricia while I figured out what to do, but it was time to bring her in. "Dad," she said after I explained everything, "I'm flying out there this weekend. Don't do anything else until I get there." "Patty, you don't need to." "Yes, I do." "Mom documented all this for a reason. She knew you'd try to handle it alone, but this is too big. We're family, and family sticks together when someone's trying to rob us." She was right, of course. Patricia arrived Friday night, took one look at Martha's documentation, and came to the same conclusion I had. We needed professional help. She'd researched lawyers online and found Barbara Johnson, an estate attorney with 22 years of experience and a reputation for handling complex family financial disputes. Monday morning, I sat across from Barbara Johnson in her downtown office. She's maybe 50 years old, gray hair pulled back, sharp eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. Her office was all business. Law books, file cabinets, a big mahogany desk that looked like it had seen plenty of difficult conversations. "Mr. Martinez," she said after reviewing everything for 30 minutes, "your wife documented this very thoroughly. This isn't a family dispute. This is systematic financial fraud. We're filing criminal complaints as well as civil suits. How long will this take? Civil cases can take months, but the criminal investigation will move faster. The evidence your wife gathered is exceptional. Financial Crimes Unit will be very interested in this." I liked Barbara immediately. She didn't waste time on sympathy or small talk, just laid out the facts and told me what she was going to do about it. Reminded me of the good project managers I'd worked with over the years, people who saw a problem and knew exactly how to fix it. Barbara filed the first motions within a week. Formal objection to all the unauthorized transfers, request for full account audits, and a referral to the district attorney's office for criminal charges. She also froze the remaining assets and accounts Linda had access to. "This is going to get ugly," Barbara warned me. "When people realize their scheme is falling apart, they tend to panic. Be prepared for that." The confrontation came sooner than I expected. Stephen showed up at my house the following Saturday morning, Linda right behind him. I was drinking coffee in the kitchen, going through some of Martha's old photo albums, when I heard Stephen's truck in the driveway. I knew that engine sound. He'd been driving the same Ford F-150 for 8 years. "Dad," Stephen said when I opened the door. His face was red, the way it used to get when he was a teenager and knew he was in trouble. Behind him, Linda was wearing what I call her business face, the expression she used when she was trying to sell someone something they didn't want. They came into the living room, Stephen fidgeting with his baseball cap. Linda sitting straight-backed on the couch like she was chairing a board meeting. "Rick," Linda started using that tone people use when they think you're not thinking clearly. "There's been some kind of misunderstanding about the investment accounts. Stephen and I want to work this out within the family." What misunderstanding would that be, Linda? The lawyer, the complaints you filed? You're making this much more complicated than it needs to be. We can settle this privately, keep it between us. I looked at my son. Stephen was staring at his hands, not meeting my eyes. In that moment, I saw the little boy who used to hide behind his mother's skirt when he'd broken something, hoping someone else would fix it for him. Stephen, I said, look at me, son. He finally looked up, and I could see the guilt written all over his face. Dad, it wasn't supposed to happen like this. Linda said it was just temporary, that we'd pay it back before you noticed. Pay back what? Exactly. The money we borrowed against your retirement accounts. Linda explained it as an investment opportunity that would benefit everyone. Son, that money wasn't borrowed, it was stolen. $185,000 over 18,000 months. Your mother was dying and your wife was robbing us blind. Linda's composure cracked just a little. You could see it around her eyes, the way her jaw tightened. That's not fair. Richard, we were under tremendous financial pressure. Stephen's been laid off twice in the past year. We have Nancy's college tuition coming up. We thought you had more than enough for retirement. You thought wrong? If you continue with this legal action, Linda said, her voice getting harder, you're going to destroy this family. Stephen could lose his job if this becomes public. Is that what Martha would have wanted? That's when I lost my patience. Look, I'm usually pretty even-tempered, but bringing up Martha like that was crossing a line. Don't you dare talk to me about what Martha wanted. Martha spent her last months documenting what you did because she knew I'd need that evidence. She died knowing her son's wife was a thief. Stephen flinched, like I'd slapped him. Linda just stared at me with those cold eyes. We're offering you a settlement, Linda said. $75,000 paid over 2 years. That's more than fair considering the family relationship. $75,000 out of the $185,000 you took, that's not a settlement, that's an insult. They left after that. Stephen looked back once as they walked to their truck, but Linda kept her eyes straight ahead. I watched them drive away and felt something settle in my chest. Not satisfaction exactly, but the calm that comes when you stop pretending something isn't what it is. The legal proceedings moved faster than Barbara had predicted. Linda's response to the civil suit was handled by Ronald Foster, a local real estate attorney who was clearly out of his depth. Their defense was that all the transfers had been made with my knowledge and consent as part of a family investment strategy. Here's the thing about lies. They fall apart when someone shines a light on them. That defense lasted exactly 1 hearing. Barbara presented Martha's documentation in chronological order. Bank statements, email printouts, recorded phone calls where Linda discussed completing the transfers before the estate situation gets complicated. The judge was a woman named Sarah Williams, maybe 55 years old, who'd been hearing financial fraud cases for 15 years. She'd seen this story before, family members using trust and access to steal from elderly relatives. You could tell she didn't have much patience for it. Linda took the stand to testify about these supposed family investment agreements. She was smooth at first, confident, describing conversations with Martha about moving money into higher yield opportunities. Professional tone, financial jargon, the whole package. Then Barbara cross-examined her with the email evidence. Emails between Linda and her accomplice, Eddie Peterson, an insurance broker who'd helped create the shell companies. Emails dated after Martha had already begun chemotherapy, when she was too sick to be making complex financial decisions. Ms. Martinez, Barbara said, holding up a printed email. In this message to Mr. Peterson, you write, "We need to complete the final transfers before the old man starts asking too many questions. Can you explain how that language is consistent with a family investment agreement?" Linda stammered through an explanation about informal language not meaning anything significant, but you could see the jury wasn't buying it. Neither was Judge Williams, who was taking notes and looking more skeptical by the minute. The smoking gun came when Barbara presented the forged signature evidence, account modification forms that required my co-signature submitted without my knowledge. Linda had practiced my signature well enough to fool the bank's automated systems, but not well enough to fool a handwriting expert. Ms. Martinez, Barbara continued, are you familiar with the term signature forgery under North Carolina statute? For the first time, Linda's composure completely cracked. Her eyes darted around the courtroom, to her lawyer, to Stephen sitting in the back row, anywhere but at the evidence spread out on the table in front of her. That signature looks similar to mine. I said when Barbara called me to testify, but I never signed those documents. I never authorized any of those transfers. And I sure as hell never agreed to let my daughter-in-law steal my retirement money while my wife was dying of cancer. The criminal trial was even more straightforward. The DA's office had assigned a prosecutor named Kevin Moore who specialized in financial crimes. The evidence Martha had gathered was so complete that Linda's attorney tried to negotiate a plea deal halfway through the proceedings. Linda was convicted on 2 counts of financial fraud and 1 count of document falsification. The judge sentenced her to 18 months supervised probation, full restitution of $210,000, including legal costs and damages, and 500 hours of community service. Her financial advisor license was revoked by the state regulatory board within 30 days. Eddie Peterson lost his insurance broker license and was charged separately for his role in setting up the shell companies. The whole network Linda had used to move our money fell apart like a house of cards. The money started coming back within 60 days of the criminal conviction. Linda and Steven had to sell their house to raise the cash, that nice brick ranch they bought 5 years ago in the suburbs. The civil judgment was ironclad, no way to appeal, no way to delay. Steven called me once after everything was settled, about 3 months later. I was out in the garage, working on refinishing an old workbench that had belonged to my father when the phone rang. "Dad," he said, and I could hear something different in his voice, not the defensive tone from before, but something quieter, maybe even ashamed. "I know I screwed up. I let Linda convince me that you and Mom had more money than you knew what to do with. I thought we were just borrowing against an inheritance that was going to come to us anyway. Son, the problem isn't that you made a mistake. The problem is that you let your wife steal from your dying mother and didn't say a word." Long pause on the other end. "I know that now. I'm getting some counseling, trying to figure out how I let things get so far out of hand. Linda filed for divorce last week. That surprised me, though. Maybe it shouldn't have. Women like Linda don't stick around when the money runs out and the consequences start piling up. I'm sorry about the divorce, Steven. Don't be. I should have stood up to her years ago, should have protected you and Mom instead of going along with her schemes." "That's good, son. Recognizing the problem is the first step to fixing it. We still talk, my son and I, but it's different now. Maybe it always will be. Trust is like a concrete foundation. Once it cracks, you can repair it, but it's never quite as solid as the original pour." Steven moved into a small apartment across town, got steady work with a commercial construction crew. He comes by for dinner sometimes, helps me with projects around the house. We're working on it, one conversation at a time. Patricia comes to visit more often now. She was out here for Thanksgiving, brought Nancy with her. My granddaughter's doing well in college, studying accounting like I mentioned. Smart girl, says she wants to help people protect their money from folks like her former stepmother. "Grandpa," she said over turkey dinner, "I've been thinking about what happened with Linda. How did she fool everyone for so long? She was smart and she was patient," I told her, "and she understood something about people, that we want to trust family, even when the evidence tells us we shouldn't." Nancy nodded, taking mental notes the way college kids do. "In my forensic accounting class, we learned that most financial fraud is committed by people the victims know and trust." That's exactly right. Strangers can't steal from you the way family can, because strangers don't have access to your accounts or your trust. I kept Martha's documentation system after everything was settled. Not the evidence of Linda's theft, that's locked away with Barbara Johnson in case we ever need it again, but Martha's method of organizing financial records. Everything dated, everything categorized, everything where it belongs. It's become a habit now, one that served me well. Gary and I have been talking to other guys at the VFW about financial security for seniors. It's amazing how many of us have stories about family members or caregivers who turned out to be less trustworthy than we thought. We started a monthly meeting where Barbara Johnson comes in to talk about protecting assets and recognizing the warning signs of financial abuse. The thing is, Gary said at our last meeting, most of us worked our whole lives to build something. We deserve to keep it. He's right. We had about 20 guys show up to that meeting, retirees, widowers, some married couples, people who'd spent 30, 40 years building careers, saving money, planning for retirement, and almost all of them had stories about someone trying to take advantage of them. Not always family, but often people they trusted. The house feels different without Martha, of course, quieter. But I've got routines now that work for me. Coffee with the newspaper in the morning, lunch with Gary twice a week, volunteer work at Habitat for Humanity on Saturdays. I'm building kitchen cabinets for a family whose house was damaged in the floods last year. Keeps my hands busy and my mind focused. Sometimes people ask me if I'm angry about what Linda did. The honest answer is that I was angry, furious even, for several months. But anger is exhausting when you're 62 years old and trying to rebuild your life. What I feel now is more like satisfaction. Justice got served, the money came back. The law worked the way it's supposed to work. Martha left me more than just evidence of Linda's theft. She left me a reminder that you don't have to accept betrayal just because it comes from family. You don't have to stay quiet about theft just because the thief is married to your son. Standing up for yourself isn't about being vindictive, it's about refusing to be a victim. Here's what I learned from all this. If someone you trust is handling your money, check their work. Review those statements every month, ask questions when something doesn't look right. If someone tells you that questioning their financial management will destroy the family, that's exactly when you need to start asking harder questions. Your money is your security, your independence, your ability to take care of yourself when you can't work anymore. Don't let anyone take that from you, no matter what their relationship to you might be. Family isn't about keeping quiet when someone's stealing from you. Real family is about doing what's right, even when it's hard. Trust but verify. That's what Martha taught me in the end. It's good advice for anyone, but especially for those of us who've worked our whole lives to build something worth protecting. Linda's serving her probation now, working at some retail job making minimum wage. Eddie Peterson got 6 months in county jail. Steven's getting his life back together slowly. Patricia and Nancy visit when they can. The money's back in my accounts where it belongs. Most importantly, I sleep well at night. When you've done the right thing, when you've stood up for yourself and the people you love, that's worth something. That's worth a lot, actually. What would you have done in my place? I'd genuinely like to know. Remember this, the people who try hardest to convince you that asking questions will hurt the family are usually the same people who are already hurting it behind your back. At 62, I learned that protecting what you've earned isn't selfish. It's your responsibility to everyone who depends on you, including the grandchildren who will need to know that integrity still matters in this world.